There was something special about him. So he said that isnad comes through me, but the meaning comes through him. So he would say that about his student. So now it's interesting, so these circles, Abu Zayd al-Kurdi's father was Ibrahim al-Qurani. So Ibrahim al-Qurani was the one who really established a hadith school in the Hijaz. And from that school, so many graduates came out. One of the common teachers, or one of the common students, so Abu Tahir al-Kurdi, and there was another teacher, Muhammad Hayat al-Sindi. So he was originally from Sindh, but had settled there, also involved in teaching hadith. They were both teachers of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab as well. So Abdul Wahhab, the founder of the school in Hijaz, attended the same circles that Shah Waliullah attended, the same classes, same lessons. We don't have any evidence that they met. There's no, because they're very close contemporaries, so there's no mention of each other in their writings. But it could be possible they were sitting in class together from the same teacher. So that just gives you an idea how the 20th or the 19th century Islamic revival was linked. Okay, so this was a very important phase in the life of Shah Waliullah. So he spent about 2 years, a very short period, but in 2 years he learned so much and he changed so many perspectives and he was transformed. And then he went back to India after he was done, and he spent the rest of his life in India with a project, with a plan, doing the work that he wanted to do. That leads us to part 3 of his life, which is called revival. So now what he did was, so Shah Waliullah, everything that he learned, all the inspiration that he experienced, he wanted to bring that back. And he brought it back to India. So he, one of the things that he did was he revived the art of hadith in India. So prior to him, hadith was not popular. It wasn't popular in the rest of the world either, but especially in India, most scholars, there were 2 centers of learning at that time. It was Farangi Mahal in Lucknow and Shah Waliullah's father's madrasa in Delhi. Those are the only 2 great centers of learning prior to Shah Waliullah. So they would teach philosophy and aqidah and fiqh, but hadith was not very strong. So most of these scholars would graduate and never study Bukhari, never study Muwatta, never study the books of hadith. So Shah Waliullah was one of the people who tried to change that. So he brought back this infusion of hadith into India. He included it in his curriculum. He began to teach the Muwatta. He wrote 2 commentaries on the Muwatta. So his favorite book of hadith was the Muwatta of Imam Malik, which shows you how he appreciated other schools. So he wrote 2 different commentaries on the Muwatta. So he expanded his school, he began to teach, and then he started his writing career. So his writing career began upon his return to India. He wrote over 60 books, 39 in Persian language and the rest in Arabic. So he had a great scholarly life. He taught many hundreds of scholars in India. And so many of, if you look at, so now if you study the history of India, from Shah Waliullah's time to the modern era, so many of the great centers, so many of the great, some of the great Islamic work that was done in various fields, it traces back to people who went to Shah Waliullah's madrasa and they were infused by his approach and his revival. He passed away in Muharram 29, 1176, corresponding to 1763 of the Christian calendar. So that's a brief synopsis of his life. And he wrote some remarkable books, of which probably the greatest, according to most, is a book that we're going to be studying, at least one chapter of that, Hujjatullahi Baligha. We'll have more to say next week about that book when we start looking at that work in particular. But this is a brief synopsis of the life of this great man who left such a large legacy. His books are still read today. They're still studied today, and they're still relevant today. Many books are no longer relevant. People read them just as historical interest. But his books are tremendously relevant. He speaks to many issues that we're grappling with today. So there's a huge revival of interest in his life. And even Western scholars are studying the life of Shah Waliullah, rahimahullah ta'ala. Some will end with some lessons, some golden lessons from his life. Just we mentioned the synopsis, gave you a brief history of his life. You see the importance of family. Islamic learning starts in the home, and you can see that from the life of Shah Waliullah. His father was pious, his mother was pious, they were both scholarly, and they had plans for their children. So Shah Waliullah was the first child of the second marriage at least, and They had a whole plan. When Shah Wallullah was born, by the age of 5, he's studying Islamic sciences. Where? In his house. And then eventually he moves to his father's seminary. So this is very, very important. Sometimes we neglect that living in the West. Also, another great lesson is this idea of that learning starts locally. Many of us have this image and idea that you have to go overseas to learn, I have to go to this place or that place. So we always have in our mind, in order to learn to study Quran or Hadith, I have to go to Medina, I have to go to Mauritania, I have to go here, I have to go there. But every great scholar first learned locally, and learning started locally, and they absorbed all the knowledge of their area before they traveled. Even someone like Imam al-Bukhari, someone like Shah Waliullah, someone like Ibn Taymiyyah, someone like Ibn al-Qayyim, when they were in their area, they would go to all the scholars in their area, and then they would absorb all that knowledge, and they would surpass. Once they surpassed the scholars of their area, there was nothing left to learn, then they would travel. They didn't start with travel. So many people today, they want to go here, they want to go there, but they won't take advantage of the classes happening in their own masjids, in their own centers. So this is something very, very important to learn from Shah Waliullah and from all the great scholars. Also, it's never too late to learn. So Shah Waliullah, he started early, but look at the formative period of his life was when he went to Hajj. And how old was he? The age of 30. So 30 for us is young, but at that time is very old, because at that time you're a scholar by the age of 12 and 14. Shah Waliullah got married at the age of 14. So this was, life was very fast, and the people matured early. So this was very different culture, and this is 300 years ago. So it's never too late to learn. Shah Waliullah, when he went to Hajj, he was 30 years old. He was already a scholar. He was head of a huge seminary in one of the largest schools in India. But when he went to the Hijaz, he sat in classes to learn. And he learned from so many scholars, and he sat just like a student. So this is a great lesson for us, that no matter what age we're at or what level we are, it's not, we're always in a learning process. And also, Shah Waliullah wasn't afraid to learn from anyone. So although he came from India, and he was an expert in Hanafi fiqh initially, when he went to Hijaz, he was studying Shafi'i fiqh. He was studying Hadith with the people who were Ahl al-Hadith. They didn't follow any fiqh. So he studied from everyone, and he benefited from everyone. When he came back, you can see that in his writing, that respect for every school and every group. And he always found excuses for every other school of thought. And he says that they all have the truth. They just have different ways of looking at it. And sometimes he would prefer other opinions. So he was very flexible and liberal in that approach. And that's something we need today. Also, when you go overseas, many people, they go overseas and then they never come back to their own communities. Shah Waliullah, he left and he experienced this revival. There were people from all over the world. Instead of going to a foreign land to start teaching and giving da'wah, where did he go? He came right back to where he started. And he brought all that knowledge back to his own community, his own father's seminary, and he continued to work there. So that's also very, very important. We should never forget where we come from and our own communities. Also, seeking reform from within. So Shah Waliullah, although different revivalists had different approaches, one of the approaches of Shah Waliullah is that he always sought to change things from within. So when he came back to India, he didn't start a new seminary. He didn't advocate radical change, but he went back to his father's seminary, began teaching what he was teaching, but just infused it with those new perspectives. And he tried to change things from within. So you can see that from his life. He never condemned the Hanafi school, for instance. And that's why Hanafis today still respect Shah Waliullah. If he was a radical revivalist, as some are, he would come back and say, you guys are all wrong, this approach is wrong, we need to go with Hadith. And so then he would have alienated all of that whole constituency. So he was always part of where he was. And even in the school of Tasawwuf, he remained in the circles of Tasawwuf, but what he did, he changed. So he would change the things they were doing, the practices with the Sunnah. He would bring the Hadith there, and he would give them the du'as and the adhkar from the Prophet ﷺ. So this is a great approach of his, that he was always willing to work within the communities and within the circles that he was involved in, rather than coming from the outside and refuting and trying to destroy it, as many people do. So these are some brief lessons from his life, rahimahullah ta'ala. With that, any questions? I'll open the floor for comments or questions.
Yes. How long did he stay in after Hajj?
In Hajj, he stayed only about less than 2 years. So he spent about 2 years there. So he was 30 years in India, about 2 years in Hijaz, and then the rest of his life when he came back in India.
What was the name of the book he wrote on Ibn Taymiyyah?
I will have to look it up. I don't, because my computer is off limits with this slide, so I don't have my notes open in front of me. It's a small booklet. It's not published. It's not that popular, but it's a very small booklet. So it may not even be published, but I'll look it up. So there are 60 books. So the problem with someone like that, only the books that people want to read, it's basically interest, right? Supply and demand. They get published. So the rest of so all of his books haven't been published. A lot of his books are unpublished, so no one knows where they are. They may be in some manuscript form in some libraries, and many of them may be destroyed by the passage of time. So generally books survive that people are interested in, and they get published and republished again and again. So I don't believe that book was published. I could be wrong.
Yeah. When you say hadith, I'm really very much I don't know much about the basics of this. But when you say hadith was not in the Indo-Pak subcontinent, not popular but not being taught. My thought was hadith was always there in every section of the Islamic world, and it was part and parcel with Quran everywhere. It's not so.
No, it's not about not being there. The idea is it being taught and is being studied? Is it part of a curriculum?
Mm-hmm.
So it was not. And even after Shah Wallullah, he wasn't able to change it as much as he wanted. So even after him, so as I mentioned, the two centers of learning in India were Farangi Mahal and also Shah Walliullah's father's seminary. And so the purpose of these seminaries, many of them, especially Farangi Mahal, was to produce judges for the Mughal court. So it was basically a financial career decision. So this whole Dars-e-Nizami that we study in most of the Darul Ulooms, it came from this system. So the system was to produce, initially started in the Abbasid era, but the system was to produce judges for the courts, to give them jobs. And so they would study philosophy, and they would study fiqh, legal and fatawa and things like that, the stuff that was needed. So that many of the source sciences were not taught so much. So part of that system, hadith was never taught. You'd be surprised, it's hard to understand, but it just wasn't taught until Shah Waliullah infused it. And even after his time, some of the great other seminaries that developed were not so strong in hadith. For instance, Darul Uloom Deoband is the most popular, one of the most popular, or as at least people know it the most. Hadith was never part of their curriculum until one of the founders, Rashid Ahmad Gangohi, he was a student of one of the students of the sons of Shah Waliullah. So because of that Shah Waliullah's influence, he had a respect for hadith, and he for the first time introduced hadith as a formal part of the alim course in India. Prior to that, they never studied hadith. And even, so they introduced hadith, but even if you look at that, many critics of this whole seminary, they say the hadith is very symbolic, it was infused in there, but it's studied in the last year. So you spent 6 years studying all the sciences without studying hadith separately. In the last year of your life, you study the 6 books of hadith really fast, at speed, super speed, without a lot of comprehension. So it's still not ideal. But, and if you look at an example of just what we mean by that, if you look at the works of fiqh produced in Hanafi fiqh, most of the books of fiqh, read them, they all mention opinions and sources, but no reference of hadith. And when they do reference hadith, some of them, the references are not so strong. They're from books that don't exist, or the hadith are not so strong. So that gives you, the idea here is that hadith was not really taught.
But this was different, but hadith was very much there in Hijaz and all those areas.
Every period had ups and downs. So initially, like after the time of the Prophet ﷺ, hadith kind of was based in Medina. right? Because all the companions were in Medina. So Imam Malik was in Medina. So the center of hadith was in Medina, and a second center shifted over to Kufa when many companions went to Kufa, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. So these are two centers of hadith. And then also Makkah had, because Sufyan ibn Uyayna and Abdullah ibn Zubayr and others, so you had, after 100 years of Hijrah, 150 years, you could say there were three centers of hadith, Makkah, Medina, and Kufa. And then it shifted to Damascus over time. So in the 3rd or 4th century, shifted to Damascus because the Umayyad era, the Umayyads were the capital in Damascus, everyone was going there. And then by the time of Imam Ahmad, 400 years, or actually before that, the time of the 6 Imams of Hadith, Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi. By that time, the center of Hadith had shifted from all these regions. It was no longer in Hijaz. It was now in Khurasan, Persian area. So all these 6 Imams were from, Bukhara, Samarkand, and Sijistan. So that's where you would go to learn Hadith. Everywhere else it was dead. And then it shifted to Egypt in the time of Ibn Hajar, and then there were schools of Hadith. So it wasn't always in Hijaz. In Hijaz, Ibrahim al-Qurani in the 17th century and early 18th century, he brought it back. So now the center of Hadith has shifted back to Hijaz. And then Shah Wallullah brought it to India, and after he left, it kind of died out in Hijaz. So now, like, India became a great center. There's a great tradition of Hadith scholarship in India in the 18th and 19th century. So, it's a matter of focus. It's not that the Hadith is gone, the books are there. It's a matter of interest, focus. Are people interested in this? Are there seminaries and institutionalized representation of Hadith? Allah.
It was during the time of Imam Wahab too?
Yes, so I mentioned Shah Wallullah sat in classes where Abdul Wahab was sitting in the same classes. But we don't know if they met, but they had the same teacher. It's the same exact time period.
But there was a revival of Hadith at that time in Hijaz.
Yeah. So at that time it was in Hijaz. So when Shah Wallullah brought the interest here, then after, you can say, about 50 years after him, it kind of diminished in Hijaz. And people would travel to India to study Hadith. So it kind of shifted to India. Not immediately at that time, but after they passed, well after they passed.
So it was, the only source was from Shah Wallullah for learning Hadith in India at that point? Or
Yes,
there were some
absolutely.
other scholars?
And not only, so what's interesting is there's a revival of Hadith in terms of, reading books of Hadith the way they used to read them in the past, which is like reading the entire book to a shaykh, getting corrections, and having the isnad, linking yourself with that isnad. So every isnad of Hadith goes through Shah Wallullah today, anywhere in the world. Because it kind of, when Shah Wallullah established in India, it kind of died out everywhere else. So all the major routes of transmission of Hadith go through Shah Wallullah, not just India, everywhere in the rest of the world. So people even from Morocco, people from North Africa would travel either to scholars in India, or when they came for Hajj, they would come meet them and try to get some of their knowledge. So Shah Wallullah is unique in that Allah blessed him. He became like the conduit, and there really was no one else of his generation. So all Hadith chains go through Shah Wallullah. In your handouts or in the workbook that I sent you, there's, actually I should put it on this slide. I made a chart during my studies of the Hadith lineage, or the Hadith intellectual lineage of Shah Wallullah. Okay, so it shows you I think that's very useful to look at. So this is a chart, okay? It's an extensive chart. This is tracing the Hadith legacy of Shah Wallullah. So if you look at here, okay, I'll point out, I'll make it kind of big. So if you look at Shah Wallullah is a big box in the center, right? I don't think you can see the cursor well. His father was Shah Abdul Rahim, and he collaborated with Aurangzeb, the great Mughal emperor. Now Shah Wallullah, when he went to Hijaz, he studied with Muhammad Hayat Sindhi and Abu Tahir al-Kurdi. So this is Ibrahim al-Kurdi al-Qurani on top. Actually, I'll show you from here. So Ibrahim al-Qurani was the one who established Hadith in Hijaz. He died in 1690. So that's well before Shah Wallullah. But his son, this is his son, Abu Tahir al-Kurdi, that was a favorite teacher of Shah Wallullah. So he learned Hadith from him, he brought it back here. Also, Muhammad Hayat al-Sindhi was another student, and he also, Shah Waliullah learned with him. And Abdul Wahab is here. So Abdul Wahab studied under Hayat al-Sindhi, again part of the same circle. And then not only that, if you look at some of the other links, we don't know, perhaps you don't know Imam al-Shawkani so well, but Imam al-Shawkani was a great scholar of Yemen who lived in the 19th century, 1834. So he wrote some amazing books that are still studied today. And he, his lineage goes back through also the same circles, Abu Tahir al-Kurdi. So this Shawkani tradition, which is still studied today, it goes back to the same circle, Qurani circles. Okay. Now Shah Waliullah, he had 4 sons. So if you look at it, 4 sons. So he had Shah Abdul Qadir, Shah Abdul Ghani, Shah Abdul Aziz, and Shah Rafiuddin. So his grandson was Shah Ismail Shahid through his son Abdul Ghani. And he's the famous one that we did a lecture on. He led the jihad movement in the 19th century along with Sayyid Ahmad Shahid. And both of them were killed in Balakot. So they were both, he was the grandson, the direct grandson of Shah Waliullah. And they were very strict and they were very, they did a lot of reform. Shah Ismail is the one who wrote Taqiyatul Iman. It's a book on Tawheed. So this is directly linked to Shah Waliullah as well. Also, the Ahl al-Hadith school or Ahl al-Hadith school in India, most of them, Siddiq Hasan Khan and Nazir Hussain of Delhi are the 2 great figures in that school. Nazir Hussain studied under Shah Ismail Shahid, and he also studied under Shah Muhammad Ishaq. And Siddiq Hasan Khan, 2 generations from Muhammad Ishaq, one of the grandsons of Shah Waliullah. So the Ahl al-Hadith school traces their lineage, at least in Hadith, through Shah Waliullah as well. And then if you look on this side, this is the Deoband Seminary, founded by Maulana Muhammad Qasim Nanatwi, Muhammad Yaqub, and Rashid Ahmad Gangohi. And they were both, or all 3 of them were students of Shah Abdul Ghani. And Shah Abdul Ghani was the grandson, or the great-grandson rather. So Muhammad Ishaq is the grandson, Abdul Aziz is the son, Abdul Ghani is the great-grandson. So that's the Deoband Seminary. Then you had the Mazahir al-Ulum Seminary, also linked there. Also you have Maulana Maududi of Jamaat Islami. When he studied Hadith, he had isnads that go through the same links. And also Jamaat, Maulana Maududi, he was very fond of Shah Waliullah. So when you look at sources of Shah Waliullah to study his life, there are many sources. Among them are the books that Maulana Maududi wrote, including the history of the revivalist movement in Islam, which is, it contains a huge chapter with a great analysis of the life of Shah Waliullah. So all the schools are here. The only school I don't have here, because at that point I hadn't done the research, is the Brailvi school. So the Brailvi school also is linked to Shah Waliullah somehow. There's another figure. So it's not part of this circle. It goes totally outside, from Shah Waliullah outside to the side. So that's something to be added to this chart in the future. So this just gives you an idea of the influence of Shah Waliullah. It all has to do with Hadith, revival of Hadith.
The scholar who came from India, the Hadith scholar, remember we had him here.
Mm-hmm.
Which school was he?
Palanpuri, sir.
Manipuri.
Palanpuri, sir.
Where he's
Sayyid
from?
Ahmad Palanpuri?
Yeah, he's from
Yeah,
Deoband.
he's a teacher at Deoband, I think.
Oh, the Mecca.
Yeah.
That's good idea.
So that's a brief look at Shah Waliullah. I didn't want to go through too long today.
So there is a link of Shah Waliullah with the Bareilly school also?
Yes, actually, it's not such a strong link, and when I was studying, I couldn't find it, but there actually is. So, so when someone reaches the status of Shah Waliullah, like everyone has to link themselves to him. Just like, with the debates, right? Abraham Lincoln. So someone like that, everyone has to show how they're linked to Abraham Lincoln or the founding fathers. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of, so when someone has a huge seminary like that with thousands of students, you're going to have students going everywhere. So every school is going to have some link to that school or that seminary. So okay, so with the Brailvi school is slightly, I don't want to offend anyone. So they claim to have the most direct link because they say our teacher Ahmad Reza Khan's teacher was supposedly a direct student of Shah Waliullah. But if you look at his chronology of when he lived, I think his name was Ali Hazrat. It's so far from Shah Waliullah. It's likely or it's possible that he never met. But with that school, sometimes they go through the dreams, and there's so many things that are not so strong from our perspective. But they link Ahmad Reza Khan through one intermediary to Shah Waliullah.
So are they linked because of the tasawwuf by?
Yeah, so everyone would latch on to a different part of Shah Waliullah's legacy, right? So for Ahl Hadith, they'll say we're the real followers because we follow Hadith and nothing else. We throw everything else out. So they say they're the real followers. And then the Deoband seminary, they're staunch Hanafis, okay? So they say Shah Waliullah was never not a Hanafi. He never denied that he was Hanafi. So they would latch on to that Hanafi part of his legacy. And they would probably study the stuff that he did prior to going to Hijaz more than after, right? So then the Brelvi will say, his father was a Naqshbandi and he was initiated, they believed in dreams and things like that, Kashf, all those Sufi terminology. So they latch on to that part of the legacy. So, everyone takes what they want from, someone as great as Shah Waliullah. And only certain people are that great that they have so much to offer that so many people feel comfortable taking from them. But everyone has a different flavor and style of what they're taking from Shah Waliullah, rahimahullah ta'ala.
I think his madrasa died. I think he do.
Yeah, so after him, his madrasa died. So the madrasa is no longer existent. Just the graveyard is left where he's buried in Delhi. It's called the graveyard of Ahl al-Hadith. And then Farangi Mahal also kind of died out. And then after that, then you had Darul Deoband became the main one, Mazahirul Ulum, and then Nadwatul Ulama also came out. So you had all these competing centers that developed. Then you had some modernist schools like Aligarh Muslim College. So these are all like 19th century now. So this is like the 1800s and 1900s.
So there's a lot of gap, like more than 100 years between the Rahimiyya and.
Well, it didn't die immediately. So it was Shah Abdul Aziz was teaching there, and maybe up until Shah Muhammad Ishaq. But when the Mughals were taken over by the British, right? When the British came, one of the things the British did dismantle all the educational systems. So that's the great crime that they committed, that they destroyed on an institutionalized level all the Muslim educational institutions. And that was by intent. That's what they intended to do. So they basically destroyed everything. And then out of those ashes, Deoband was established, Mazahir al-Ulum, and Ahl al-Hadith had their own schools, but nothing like in terms of one school or institution. Siddiq Hassan Khan, he took advantage of the printing press. So he basically started printing for the first time in India, Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, just mass printing. And that really led to a great revolution. So he did a lot of work as well. So all these different, they're all offshoots, so to speak. So there was a destruction, an absolute destruction, and then a revival and a rise. Muslims began to rise up again. And that's the same everywhere the Europeans went, in North Africa, in Hijaz. Well, Hijaz, they didn't go so strongly, but they would destroy the whole institutional setup so that Muslims were left with nothing.
So all these schools were formed only in India, nothing outside India?
Yeah, because Shah Wali was a scholar in India, so all his direct teaching was in India. He began in India, he went back to India. So people link themselves to Shah Waliullah's tradition all over the world, including in Morocco and Hijaz. So people are proud to have an isnad that includes Shah Waliullah. In terms of schools, his work was in India, so this is all from India. So in Hijaz, you had Abdul Wahab doing his work. So most of the schools were affiliated with that. In Yemen, you had Shawkani. So all of them were going to the sources. And then in North Africa, you had Uthman Danfodio, who was a great scholar. He led a jihad in West Africa, and he established a khilafah actually in many great schools, and he was part of the same revival as well. So from this, so you can say, this is where it started, this area, right? Ibrahim al-Qurani Hijaz. Shah Waliullah took that, and all these different offshoots took that from there. But Shah Waliullah's primary work was in India. Although because he wrote in Arabic and Persian, His Persian works are not read in the Muslim world because no one reads Persian anymore. But the Arabic works are still available and they're still studied throughout the world. So his influence is there, but there's no school that's directly from him. But certainly his influence, everyone knows his name, and he's studied to this day.
So for Hadith revival, we always had some scholar in different part of the world, depending upon where they were located at that time. How do we interpret in current scenarios, the publication will revive it, or are we still going to have scholars among us who are going to revive it later or whatever? What is the difference then and now with the resources of mass media, mass production?
Well, I mean, so that's a deep question, like how do we revive something like hadith, or you can apply that to Quran or another discipline too. But with hadith the problem is hadith is, because there are hundreds of thousands of hadith, it's not like Quran. You have one Quran and you have different tafasir. So there's more of a grounding and a base. With hadith, because you have so many books, we kind of settled on 6. But there's so many contradictory hadith, and the fabricated hadith, those hadith that don't belong in the books, are still there. So, and they will always be there. So because of that, this work will never stop. So there's always a need to understand, what hadith is, understanding the nuances, understanding the discipline of ulum al-hadith, understanding how to sift through hadith, and understanding the work that Bukhari and Muslim, the great muhaddithin, did. So that is so complex today. You'll find most people don't have a clear understanding of that. Most Muslims in America don't. So even many scholars don't have a solid understanding of hadith. So that takes a whole lifetime because there's so much to study. It's very difficult to do everything. So you only have limited time. So most people go for tafsir, for instance, or they go for history, or they go for fiqh. They just want to know the final. It's haram, halal. That's it. I don't care about the sources. I don't care about. So, but alhamdulillah, recently I think there's a lot of interest in hadith even in the Western world. So there are a lot of people going in a hadith direction within various schools and within various communities. So hadith is not just simply publishing a book, because the books contain all types of hadith, right? So the books have been published, since Sadiq Hassan Khan, at least 200 years now, we're printing Bukhari and, so is that helping or adding to the confusion? Allahu A'lam. But what we need is literacy. We need to understand how to read hadith, understand what it means, understand the work of the great scholars of the past. Allahu A'lam. Yes, brother.
Did they teach in Pakistan?
No, there was no Pakistan at that time. See, Pakistan is so new that it's something that was born 50 years ago. So Shah Wallullah lived about 200 something, almost 300 years ago. So that's before Pakistan.
I saw the name Mohammed Yusuf Slide,
Yes.
the last name.
Yes.
Mullah Yusuf Slide.
Yes. Yeah, so he studied hadith. He's a great scholar. He's my shaykh, at least. He's a great scholar. He studied with the students of Anwar Shah Kashmiri. So that's on the chart there. So Anwar Shah Kashmiri was part of, Rashid Ahmad Gangohi's circles. So
He wrote so many Persian books, but did not influence in Iran?
no, that is very interesting. So up until 18th century, like our center or our main language was Persian. All our great scholars learned Persian and Arabic side by side, and many of the books we wrote were in Farsi. But something happened at that Persian was shifted to the Shias, and they took a monopoly over it, and in the Sunni world, Persian died. So now nobody understands Persian, very few. Some of the oldest people that, if you look at anyone who's above 90, might know some verses. Like Maulana Yusuf, he understands and he remembers verses, but he's not so fluent, but he studied it because that 2 generations ago they were studying it. For some reason it died. So there's no interest or revival of Persian in the Sunni world at least. And maybe it has to do with when Iran was established and the Safavids, and they took Persian as their language, it kind of made it more, kind of separated the gulf between the two languages. Very interesting, because Shah Wallullah was the first one to translate the Quran in any language. So I didn't talk about a lot of the stuff that he did, but he was the first one in the history of the Ummah to translate the Quran.
Into
That's
which
a great.
language?
He did it in Persian.
Persian.
So that's very, very interesting.
I think could be because Urdu took over.
Yeah, so Urdu maybe became the new representative of the Sunni language in that area at least.
The
You
same
see,
thing will happen with
Urdu in
Urdu.
Hijaz also now, the three
Yeah.
English, Urdu
No, I
and
think
Arabic.
Urdu no, because you still you have Pakistan and the language is still there. All the schools they still teach it. So it's still.
Even in some schools in Pakistan, they don't teach Urdu anymore.
Most of them are still doing.
The
Majority.
religious schools at least
Yeah,
teach
right.
Urdu, so it's unlikely for that to happen in the near future. Okay, with that, inshallah, see you next week.
I'm not receiving an email, did you send me an email or something?
Yeah, last week I don't send every week. मुझे रखना है कई गए हैं बता रहा
Then maybe you're not in the list.
I'm not in the list.
So I see my
Actually,
name.
I'm in the list, but.
I sent only two, like the welcome email so far. I didn't send every, and then I sent the cancellation email when I was in London.
Especially got from your other, retreat from your other.